this is one of the killing fields. Nearly 9,000 bodies have been dug up here in an area the size of a football field. Hundreds of similar places can be found all over the country. Kick the ground here, and chances are you'll find bones, teeth, and the discarded rags of the dead. This is the legacy of Pol Pot in the Khmer Rouge. Between 1975 and 1979, Pol Pot was responsible for the deaths of 1 in 5 Cambodians. There isn't a family in the country that wasn't touched by the tragedy of the Khmer Rouge years, including Reti Chems.
When the Khmer Rouge took over in 75, yeah. Family-wise, we were directly affected by the war. So I lost my parents, 2 siblings, and 25 members of my family. When my father was killed, we organized a funeral in this house.
A house that, like so much of Cambodia's past, has now gone, replaced by a shop. It's perhaps understandable then that Reti's motivation to help discover something of his country's lost history is not just professional, it's personal.
I think that each society needs to look at its own past in order to understand the present and maybe to project to the future.
And it's that need that keeps bringing him back here. 28 years after he left on the last flight out of Phnom Penh when the Khmer Rouge had captured the city, he's once again back at the airport, this time heading for the Cardamom Mountains and the body jars. Joining him are Fabrice Demeter, an expert in fossilized human remains, and ceramic specialist John Miksic. This is the day they've all been waiting for, the day they finally get to grips with the jars and the bones they contain.
When I find one human tooth, I'm the most happy man in the world. But now in the same jar, we have 4 individuals with all the postcranial skeletons, which is fantastic.
Like, you want to know more about them. You want to know, okay, what was your life like? If this is how you came to rest, what were your last thoughts like? Did you look forward to being carried up into those mountains and placed on one of those cliffs? Is that what you kind of even anticipated would be your form of heaven?
The Cardamoms have been shrouded in mystery for as long as they've been known. For hundreds of years, they've been the no-man's land of Southeast Asia. A 1 million hectare place of refuge for anyone on the run from oppression or the law. On the northeastern flank of the Cardamoms is a village called Rolak Kang Chung. At first glance, it appears little different from any other rural community, but it has its own special claim to fame. Cambodia has a largely oral tradition, its history preserved in story and song, often by monks. According to one such history, when Angkor was sacked by an invading Thai army, the royal household fled south. The same tradition says the body jars contain the remains of royalty who died in exile. Their last known place of residence? This village, Rolak Kang Chung. An advance party has been here for a couple of days getting things ready for the trip into the jungle. Heading up the advance team is Hunter Weiler, an American who's lived in Cambodia for the past 5 years. He's a wildlife advocate, and it was his tiger rangers that first brought the jars to Reti's attention. Samrit Sapoon is a local archaeologist surveying the Cardamom's jar sites on behalf of the Cambodian Ministry of Culture. Together with Reti, John, and Fabrice, they hope to relocate 2 of the jars to the National Museum in Phnom Penh for further analyses.
We've had an advanced party of rangers go in, 4 tiger rangers, 2 military police, and 1 Department of Forestry and Wildlife ranger. They went in a day ahead of us. They've secured the site, set up a small camp, and they'll be waiting for us when we land.
In the 2 years since the body jars first came to light, 12 more sites containing jars have been identified.
The reason the jars are still there is because it's so completely inaccessible. Otherwise, those jars would not have survived looters and so on for 500 years.
It turns out one of the more recently discovered sites is only a short chopper ride from the camp.
How many sites are there?
Rather than visit the original site, the team decides to go to the new one because Sapun says there are nearly 60 jars there. But before anyone goes anywhere, Reti seeks the blessing of the spirits of the people in the jars.
I think that indirectly when you look at those skeletons, they must be respected. That's the reason why we organize this religious blessing by the monk, because those skeletons were human like us. Whether they were our ancestors or not, I think they have to be treated with respect.
With the spirits placated, the expedition gets underway. Getting to the jars on foot can be tough. A 4-day march through some of the densest malarial jungle in Asia. Fortunately, the team has the use of a helicopter. What's 4 days by foot is unbelievably only 10 minutes by chopper. The helicopter means Reti and the team can land on top of the cliff and walk down to the cave. But the jars must have been carried up from the valley floor. The top of the mountain is ringed by sheer cliffs. How the jars were put here 500 years ago is almost as big a mystery as why they were put here. For Reti, this is exactly what he hoped to find. Well-preserved bones, and lots of them.
You see, it's amazing because there are bones everywhere. A vertebrae, complete one. A well-preserved femur. Oh, wonderful. Look at this here. Plenty of ribs. They're quite well preserved. Oh, this is even better. Look at that. The entire skull here.
While jar burial is not unusual in some Asian cultures, especially Indonesia and the Philippines, until these jars came to light, it was a totally unknown practice in Cambodia. But this turns out to be a unique find in more ways than one. Jars are traditionally used for what's known as secondary burial, a technique where a body is buried until its flesh decomposes. The skeleton is then dug up and the bones put into a jar.
Normally, if this is a secondary burial and if this individual, this dead corpse has been buried, you won't have such a good quality of a small, thin bone, long bone like the rib after he died.
No, it was not buried.
No, huh?
No. I think it was put directly inside the jar.
So, this is not a normal burial site.
It's really, deep cuts here. Definitely here.
That's very deep, yes.
Yeah, 1, 2, 3 here. So they may have tried to cut the limb and put both bone and flesh in these jars.
The cutting up of the bodies may have simply been driven by necessity, getting the bodies through the narrow necks of the jars.
Yes, same thing on this jar.
But it could also be associated with a ritual destruction and recreation of the body.
One interesting point, the way the bones are distributed within the jars. Like this one here, they're all big, long bones like the femur, the tibia, the big bones. And on this one here, on my side here, I was sitting on, all the flat and small, short bones, like the ribs, scapula, vertebrae, bones of the ankle and feet here. All the small and short bones are collected in this jar here.
I don't know of any recorded examples of such splitting up of bodies like this and categorizing them, kind of like filing cabinets. We got one cabinet full of bone of heads and one cabinet full of arms and one cabinet full of backs.
And spine,
And not only that, but all the skulls are female.
All females so far.
Yeah, that's
Could you tell me?
that's female, yes.
Yeah.
Seems to be
Interesting, no?
difficult to find a male in here.
For 600 years, there were only ever kings of Angkor. This is the first pin in the bubble of possibility that these jars contain the remains of the last rulers of Angkor. And then there's another.
I doubt that these people had very much in the way of movable goods, since if they were burying things like these bowls in the same caves as the bones, it suggests that they didn't really have a lot of inherited wealth.
But the jar fragments do suggest one thing: contact with a number of cultures from outside Cambodia.
There's at least 3 or 4 different kinds of jars in here, not to mention the green and porcelain. I mean, there is Chinese ware here. There's also what looks like Khmer ware. There's green glazed stuff, and there's also what looks like to me Vietnamese as well.
In just a short time, the jars at this site have provided more information than the team expected. But removing jars from here is just too risky. In the remaining few hours before nightfall, the team records as much data as possible here before traveling to the original site to remove 2 jars. The second site, about 8 kilometers from the first as the crow flies, couldn't be more different. Instead of dense jungle, open pine woodlands. And a welcome party made up of military police and tiger rangers. The police are here simply because the Cardamoms is still one of the more lawless parts of Cambodia. The rangers, because they're the guys who first brought the jars to the attention of Rati and his team. The biggest difference between the 2 sites is that there are only 3 jars here. When the jars were first discovered, there were reportedly 5. However, in Cambodia, an ancient artifact is looted from a protected site every 24 hours. Because this site is relatively accessible, it appears that the body jars are now also under threat. For Rati and the team, getting the jars to Phnom Penh now takes on a special urgency.
We take this one here, and the one in the center.
The team tries to disturb the jars as little as possible, especially the unbroken one. This is the one least likely to have been tampered with since it was first put here. Brady hopes X-ray investigation of this jar may reveal something about the way the bones were put into the jars. Because DNA analysis and radiocarbon dating are also to be carried out, the jars are wrapped to try and minimize any further potential contamination. Then they're carefully packed into a crate and airlifted back to Phnom Penh. Stage 1 of the operation has been completed successfully. However, for Rati and the team, the hard part is still to come, working out exactly why dozens of dismembered skeletons were hidden in jars in the Cambodian jungle 500 years ago. For a city of 1 million people, Phnom Penh sometimes feels like a small town. Even so, its 24-hour non-stop street life and chaotic traffic give it a big city feel. A stark contrast to the remote jungle cave the body jars have been hidden in for the last 500 years or so. The jars and the skeletons they contain are headed to a hospital across town. To help ensure that they get there in one piece and to provide a smooth run through the traffic, a police escort has been arranged. Brady and the scientists from the Osteoarchaeological Research Group that have brought the jars here for analysis make the most of their journey through the city, because they're going to spend the rest of the day in the windowless confines of the Calmette Hospital's radiology department. As a first step, the team uses a CAT scanner. As the jar passes through the machine, an X-ray is taken every few millimeters. These X-rays are then combined to create an image of what's in the jars. The idea is to try and preserve as much information as possible before the bones are removed.
There are 3 skulls here, many other bones Long bones, short bones, small bones.
Straight away, they discover a different pattern of bone distribution to the first jars they saw back in the jungle hidden in the clifftop cave. Instead of the bones being distributed by shape,